Hello everybody. I'm here with a very special teacher. I had the privilege to be a student of his for a very good and interesting workshop that he did here in Israel, in Tel Aviv, with David Zinder last year, 2019. And I interviewed a few teachers till now, and each and every one of them talked highly about him. So let's say hello to Lenard Petit.
Hello, everybody. Hello, Ofir.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I mean, it's this awful time with this coronavirus, and people are doing what they have to do, and for the most part, aside from the demonstrations that have been happening in this country, I think, well, at least where I live, people are very respectful of the orders for masks and social distancing and all this kind of thing. And it's a new life, really a new life, trying to make it work in isolation. But it's nice. I mean, I'm in a nice place.
Are you optimistic?
Yeah. I mean, the whole way of teaching and everything is changing, and it's exciting to see what people are doing, and even working in this format here of Zoom. And we at my studio with my students created a play and rehearsed it and performed it here on this format, and it was interesting to a point, and there's a lot of things that we learned, and a lot of things that we could do differently the next time, and probably the platform itself will get better than what it is now, because it seems like this is where things are happening, and it seems like the audience is no longer coming or able to come to the theater. So the audience is at home. So we got to bring theater to them at home now.
So you're planning another event like this?
I'm planning to get together with some people. I'm already speaking with some people on Zoom, people who are like-minded, people who work with the technique internationally. David and Lisa, both in this little group that meets once a week. And yeah, we're optimistic. It started off with, oh, this is terrible. And, teaching on Zoom and teaching on the internet is impossible, especially since we teach such a physical thing. And we had that conversation for a couple of weeks, and then we finally decided to move on to other things and try to attack this problem. And so as a group, people are individually teaching on this format. And like I said, I made a play, and more and more people are getting involved with it. So yeah, I'm optimistic, and I'm encouraged. We've got to go on, right? We're artists, we have to go on.
Yeah, so let's dive to the questions, and we'll start with the basic information, which is name. You can answer the age, country, and current job and position.
Me? My age?
Yeah.
I have to reveal it. I just turned 67 years old in February. Today is my wedding anniversary. 25 years married to my wife, Meg Pantera.
Oh, wow.
And it's going great.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. We're going to renew our vows and go on for another 25 anyway.
Wow.
But it's all very nice. It's been a fantastic adventure with her. And we raised a boy, and he's a grown man now, and everybody's been nice to us.
And you need to say your name, sir, and current job and position.
My name is Leonard Petit. I am an artist. I am the artistic director of the Michael Chekhov Acting Studio, which has been located in New York City for the last 22 years. And because of what's going on now, where a lot of it is in question about where it should be and how we should go on, but we're going to go on as an institution. We're going to go on as an entity, but it's probably going to have a new face, a whole new operation. We have to figure that out. That figuring will happen this summer, I suppose. Right now, I'm not in New York City. I'm in upstate New York, Irving, New York, at Lotus Bay, right on Lake Erie. This is where we have our summer retreats that we've been having for the last few years. And we won't be having a retreat this year due to social distancing and maintaining all that sort of that rigor. But we will be back here, and we have thoughts of relocating the school and studio up here, where the actors will come and live here in Lotus Bay for the time that they're studying. Do I have to tell you anything else about me? Was that, I mean, was there in the question anything else that I missed?
No, you're great. And another question, what's your first memory of the art world that made an impact? You know, maybe a theater performance, a movie, a painting, I don't know.
It was, I think it was music. It was being introduced to Johann Sebastian Bach. And I had never in my whole life, I was maybe 18 or 19 years old or something when I heard that for the first time. And I just, I haven't really recovered from hearing that. It just it changed everything about the idea of creation and form, and those ideas started to become present for me, and they hadn't been before. They were just, you know, I mean, I liked the Beatles and whatever, you know, the Rolling Stones, and listened to music, and never considered that really art. It was just like pop music. But when I was introduced to classical music, it was very significant. I started looking around at other things and became very interested in poetry, actually, and started to work as a poet. And that's really was my intention when I went to college, was to become a poet.
Oh, that's what you wanted to do?
That's what I wanted to do, yeah. And it's, you know, in terms of making a living, it's being a poet is, you know, second to being an actor or being a puppeteer or something like that. You know, there's no money in it, but there was a love for it, a love for words, language, and that sort of thing.
But that's a great archetype. The
poet?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think I still am that somehow. I mean, I do continue to write and appreciate poetry indeed.
And can you say maybe a one piece of Bach that you really, you know, enjoy, really inspired by?
Well, I was inspired by this piece of the Brandenburg Concertos, and actually. At the time that I was inspired by it, I was with my partner, my professional partner, John Fleming, and we were mimes. It was just like in the 1980s, I think, and we made a piece, a mime piece that was really very unique and not like other mime that was happening at the time. And we used this the Brandenburg Concerto to that was behind it. It was called Billy Brandenburg in the Parking Lot. But it was very inspirational, and the piece was very strong and always an enjoyable thing to do, to perform. People liked it. It was, at the time, I was a street artist performing on the streets in New Orleans for tourists and locals, and it was actually a pretty good living we were making. And we were working all the time. We were able to go to a studio there and work all the time because we made enough money to live by performing on the streets. On weekends when, you know, all the tourists were there and stuff. And it was it's a very lively place, New Orleans.
So for our next question, when and where did you learn the arts? The arts, not so much what I'm doing, but just the idea of the arts. Yeah, actually,
it was when I left home. Yeah,
what?
It's when I left home and went to college, and that was, I guess I was around 18 or 19, and that's the same time when I was, you know, introduced to Johann Sebastian Bach and Beethoven and Mozart and all these people, and I had made a friend there who was, I guess he was cultured. I was not cultured, and he introduced me to the music. He was a musician. And he introduced me to all this great music, and then this was, you know, it was a liberal arts school, and so arts were the thing that we were studying basically.
So are you speaking college?
Yes.
So what was the name of this college?
The college doesn't exist anymore. It was called Franconia College, and it was a very progressive school, and it was small. There were only like 350 students in the school, in the whole school. And its last official act was to award Muhammad Ali an honorary degree.
Oh.
And then it failed.
What?
The school failed.
Was it in New York?
No, it was in Franconia, New Hampshire, in the White Mountains. It was really removed. It was an old like Victorian resort hotel in the mountains for rich people, I imagine, because it was really a very beautiful building. And I guess the building was unused for a number of years, and they formed this school that was completely very, very unique. And it was important, I think, for the students to appear to be unique. And so in a unique situation like that, everybody trying to be unique, it was a very strange place. It was, in the days of the hippies and a lot of hallucinogenic drugs and walks in the woods. It was like located in the woods. And so we spent a lot of time in the mountains.
So you learned their acting, but though, I mean...
I didn't really study acting there, but interestingly enough, there was a theater department there, and I found out later that the man who was leading that was actually a follower of Michael Chekhov, and he was teaching Chekhov technique at that place at the time that I was there. But I wasn't doing it, although I did work in a film. I made a film there as an actor, and this is the first time I had done anything like that, and it was a silent film, I guess. It was like Super 8 or something like that. But there was a film section at the school, and one of my friends was in that, and he was making a film, and asked me to be in it, and that was fun and exciting, and there was something in that just grabbed me, so that when I left that school, I only went there for a year, and it was very expensive, and I didn't quite know why I was there. So I quit, and I moved to Boston and got involved with the theater in Boston. And then later, many years later, I came to study Chekhov technique, and the man who was the manager of the Chekhov studio had been a student there when I was a student. And it was his dream to bring this Chekhov work to New York. And so he created this place and got in touch with the people who were my teachers, famous people in the Chekhov world, students of Michael Chekhov, and he got them to start teaching there and make this studio. And I, had read the book or whatever. Maybe I'm getting ahead of your questions.
Maybe, but what was the name of the teacher that you didn't know that was teaching in the college, Chekhov?
I can't remember his name.
Well, okay, maybe.
I didn't. He wasn't my teacher, so he didn't make any kind of impact on them.
No,
but I know there was a theater department there, and they were doing plays. And I went to see the plays that they did, and they were working with Chekhov technique. I know that.
And
I didn't then, but I know now.
Yeah. So, what was your first part, professional part?
The fact is, I've been an actor for, I don't know, something like almost 40 years. But for the most part, I've worked in original pieces made by the company, ensemble work. And I was in a couple of groups, a member of these groups, and we would, in the course of a year, make a few plays and perform them. And so, it would be difficult to say was my first professional part. I mean, I'd like to say that my first professional part that really meant something to me was to play Pierrot. because he's, for me, kind of like the Hamlet of clowns. And there was a piece in which Pierrot appeared, and it was a piece that I worked on with this group of mine, and it was called The Fairground Booth, which was also was a Russian play by that Meyerhold had made, and it's called Balaganchik in Russian, and very strange. It was kind of like a watershed period for Meyerhold, this piece, and we took it on, and it was really quite extraordinary. And I played Pierrot in that piece. So it had, Pierrot and Harlequin and these other kind of classical figures that appeared, and then other kinds of strange people. I don't know if you know.
Meyerhold had a phase of commedia dell'arte, right? He was interested in that.
Yeah, yeah.
And so when was the first time that you came across the Chekhov technique? And maybe what did you think about it at first?
Well, I was, as I said, I had studied mime, and it was very important to me. And I realized that actually I was quite good at it, because I can move my body and ask my body to do things, and it will do it the way that I imagine it should be. And so this work of mime in the 1970s was pantomime was very big thing. That's also coming out of the hippies, I think. Putting white face makeup on and performing these things without words. And so I got swept up into that. And then I had a teacher who said, you really have to be an actor in the first place, and then you could be a mime. You could be a good mime if you're a good actor. If you're not a good actor, you really can't do this. You can only move your body, and it looks kind of technical and wonderful, but there's no soul in it. The soul is really the actor. And so I said, okay, well, I got to do that. And I went to a bookstore and found, just looking through books, and found Michael Chekhov's book, To the Actor. And I opened it up, and the first chapter in the book was about the body, about moving the body. And I said, oh, this is not thinking stuff, this is moving stuff. And I bought the book and loved it, and made a very big connection with it, and was able to do it on a certain level, not fully, not completely understanding it. And but I loved all the ideas. I loved the ideas in his book, where he talks about Michelangelo or Leonardo da Vinci, and how we have to have that kind of an imagination, and be burning with that kind of an imagination. And I thought at first, well, that's a nice thing to reach for. I don't think I have. I'm not Leonardo da Vinci. I'm not Michelangelo. I don't have that kind of skill, and surely I don't have the kind of imagination. But now I think I do. Now I think that the Chekhov technique asks you to develop your imagination in the very first place. And so I've been working at that for 35 years. And so I think that, we all have the ability to imagine, but if we develop that within us, then the imagination itself becomes a bigger, more powerful thing that can actually guide us. And that's kind of what happened. So it was the idea of the imagination and the physical body that really brought me into that work.
So through the mime to the book, and then it launched, Okay. So who is the most influential teacher or teachers that taught you the technique?
The most influential teacher that I ever had did not teach me the technique. I was aware of the technique when I went to study with this man, but I went to Paris to study with Etienne Decroux. And he is considered the father of modern mime. He was the teacher of Marcel Marceau, but he didn't do what Marcel Marceau does. He did his own thing called corporeal mime, which was closer to dance, actually. And I think he was the most influential teacher that I had in my life. I remember him to this day. I think about him. I quote him. his work is really what he gave to me is really at the bottom of everything that I do, because essentially he was an artist and he was talking to artists, but he was very also a technician and a serious craftsman, and he insisted on that. The technique was everything, but the imagination had to be there. Certainly the imagination had to be there. What he believed about art and performance and the theater is still ringing in me. But in terms of the teachers from the Chekhov work, my teacher, his name was Blair Cutting, and he was a student of Chekhov when Chekhov was at Dartington Hall. And Beatrice Straight, she was also there, and Deirdre Dupre, they were, all three of them were there. Those are the most influential teachers that I've had on the technique. And then I had the great fortune of meeting this man who Lisa Dalton was quite close to. I met him through Lisa Dalton, actually. His name was Jack Colvin. And his claim is that he was like the last protege of Michael Chekhov. And I met him through some conference, Chekhov conference. And he had a huge influence on me and was very supportive of me and what I was doing. Because, I was, at the time that I met him, I was already a teacher, already accomplished in the technique, but he moved it up to another level for me. And he also encouraged me to keep doing what I was doing, that Chekhov would be proud of what I was doing, of developments, what I guess you could call them.
And can you tell me a few words about Blair Cutting? I don't know him. Can you tell me something about him?
He also was Lisa Dalton's teacher. Lisa Dalton and I studied at the same place. I don't know what she did. She wasn't there when I was there, or she wasn't in the classes that I was in, but I know that she was there for a time studying there. What can I say? But he was a Canadian actor who went to England to study with Michael Chekhov, and then became very connected to Chekhov, and they had to leave England because of the war, World War II. When the Germans bombed London, and it just started getting very weird for them, I guess. And their safety was in question, so they moved to the United States and started school in Connecticut, very famous place in the Chekhov history. And he was a student there and part of a company there. And then he went into the Army, the Canadian Army, and brought his skills there. Actually, he told us a story of they asked him what he did in civilian life, and he said that he was an actor and an acting teacher. And they asked him if he could help to work with their ROTC young officers. Because they were having a difficult time commanding troops in the field. These regular, like maybe career soldiers or whatever. They weren't listening to these guys because they were college kids, really, not real military people, and they didn't have the presence and the command of the presence that was necessary. And he said, "Yeah, I could help them." And I mean, he told us a story to us about, we were working on this idea of the backspace, the space behind the actor. And so he said, I went in and that's what I worked with them, to give them a sense of power. And that lesson has really remained with me, about the backspace and the space of power. And it actually started me an investigation into a lot of things about the technique and about the presence of the actor. And anyway, Blair was, I guess, in his mid to late 80s when I met him, and I studied with him for about 4 years. And he was a really wonderful man, and also believed in me, which is also very nice for a student to have a teacher believe in him, and the way Jack did. And so, I got close with him, and then he passed away, and that was the end of the studio as far as I knew it. So I stopped going there.
And can you remember one influential sentence that one of your teachers told you and you remember it?
Yeah, I can remember the one from Blair, and he said that an actor has 1,000 eyes, which, you know, was like, yeah, sounds nice, but then you can really examine that for real at an imaginative level. I mean, really, and if you know the Chekhov technique, you can do something with that. So that was pretty influential. And another from Etienne Decroux was the actor must suspend himself above the blade of the knife. That has really been a rallying cry for me. I mean, every time I go on a stage, this is something that I consider, and that kind of risk needs to be present, because that's what the people are going for. I mean, he said, you know, people go to the circus to see the tightrope walker fall. That's why we go to the circus, you know, to see the accidents, but they don't fall, and we're very happy that they don't fall, and they show their skill and their talent, and they do their act and everything. But somehow we go there for the fall. It's like we go to the car races, you know, or people. I don't go to car races, but people go to car races expecting crashes. I think, you know, it's an exciting, very exciting thing, and so that kind of edge, or being, you know, where you could fall over the knife and just be cut in half, you know, if you do fall. So you have to hold a lot together as a performer.
Why, in your opinion, it is important to teach and spread the Chekhov technique?
I think that the Chekhov technique is kind. And I think that the Chekhov technique has instilled in me a sense of love for people, love for the world, love for the art, love for the skill. And so, you know, kindness and love are really important things that are slowly, or not slowly, but are not so clear anymore in the world. You know, people are not so kind to each other anymore. But I think that the best work can come from kindness, can come from love. And so, you know, we don't talk that way. We, you know, direct the students to listen to Michael Chekhov talk about that. But all the teaching has that as a foundation. One of my teachers, who was Deirdre Dupre, who was Chekhov's secretary for 25 years and wrote down everything he said in one of her classes. It was a teacher training class that I was in at the time. And she said that Michael Chekhov said to her that the teacher must teach with love so that they can nurture the artist, you know, and that was in a very striking contrast to a lot of the kind of actor training that that happens, professional actor training that happens in other techniques, where the teacher appears to be kind of mean and somewhat cruel, not kind. And in that kind of relationship or whatever, something can happen, you know, for the actor. But I wonder at what cost. You know, it's not brought out it's not opening as a flower. It's kind of squeezed out because of I don't know. I don't really know, but I know that I couldn't handle those kind of classes. I've been to one or two of them, and I don't get this. I don't understand why this teacher is talking this way to this student who's struggling to learn something and open up in themselves. You know, acting is really requires the actor to open, and to be beaten all the time. It's really, you know, what kind of person wants to open to that? So in the Chekhov work, we don't treat that kind of pedagogy doesn't exist for us. We're working with kindness and cooperation, and to nurture and bring out of the artist what's inside the artist.
There's a nice sentence that I read from the lessons for the teacher's book that MICHA published, and he
And
writes.
did Deirdre Dupre wrote that?
Yeah,
book.
transcript. Yeah, and he writes there. You can teach from intellect to intellect, and you can teach from your whole being to the whole being. There's something that's connecting to what you're saying. You can't. I mean, you can teach by being mean, but with your wholeness. But it's not. You need to put your heart also in the teaching, and you can't be mean when you're doing it. I think. I don't know.
It's the heart is really a primary functioning center in the Chekhov work. I mean, he asks us to think with the heart, not only to feel with the heart, but to think with the heart, and to see what kind of thinking, what kind of images, what kind of product actually can come out of that connection where the heart is doing the thinking. Because he thinks that, or he believed that that's people like Leonardo, who was obviously incredibly intelligent, and clearly his head is very involved in his life and what he's doing, but his heart was also on fire. He said, that's the words that he used, this fiery imagination, and his heart was on fire in a way, so which brought all this kind of thing out, and it just, it leads us to what? Compassion. And compassion is as such also, compassion is not present in that other kind of teaching. I don't see it. I haven't seen it. And there's a lot of compassion in this, and it leads us, who are students, to become artists, to use that kind of a connection, especially with the characters that we play.
And my next question is, what are the advantages of the Chekhov technique, in your opinion, compared to other methods?
The advantage is that we are developing the whole person. We're not just developing an actor, right? That the actor is a human being. And so we're working on the human being all the time, the human being and the human connections. And a good part of the work for me is what connects us as human beings, human being to human being. I use this example a lot. I'm sad and you're sad. And I'm sad for my own reasons. That's a very personal kind of thing. You're sad for your own reasons. But the sadness itself, the phenomenon of sadness, if I can call it that way, if I can call it that, is the same for us. It's actually a function that's happening, and I feel it. I say, oh, I feel this and I feel that. But it's a feeling of something is going on, and we're connected. All human beings feel sadness or experience sadness in the same way. What the sadness is, that's all individual and personal and whatever. But how we experience it, how we recognize it, that's something that I say to my students a lot. How do you know when you're sad? How do you know when you're happy? How do you recognize that? How do you know when you're jealous? How do you know when all these things that we're expected to play and work on? And if people don't work this way, they can't answer that question. They don't know. They just say, well, I just is, but what is it that's happening in you that's making you sad, or causing you to feel a sadness? It's not making you sad, but I'm experiencing it as a sensation in the body. And it's coming through everything. It's coming in my face, and it's coming in my brain and my hands and everything else. So how do you know what that is? How do you know what that is? And in time, they get it. They understand. Oh yeah, we can just do this. We can just look at these emotions as human things. I'm sure dogs feel sad, and maybe they feel it exactly the same way or experience it exactly the same way, but they don't have the ability to examine it, objectively. And that's what we do in the Chekhov technique, is we really examine the human condition objectively. And the other methods, I think, examine the personality and the personal things that are the personal motivations, the personal this is me doing this. This is me doing this, and now I have to change that into the character. And in Chekhov, we work towards transformation, and knowing that we can do it because we are objective in the choices that we make, you know, and we have compassion for the characters, and we can actually become the characters. You know, there's a story that I heard about Stanislavski and Chekhov meeting in Berlin and talking about acting to each other. And they were talking about transformation, I think, or they were talking about transformation into character. And Stanislavski said, yes, the character is in front of me, and I must grab hold of that character and bring it to me. And in doing that, I will become the character. And Chekhov said, yes, I agree. The character is in front of me, but I must move myself in the direction of the character. I must move towards the character, leave the character where it is, and move towards it. And in that moving towards it, there is a transformation, because there is compassion in that. There's no compassion in grabbing hold of something and bringing it to me. There's a force in that, right? And there's a will, a great will. And things just end up being the same all the time in many ways, you know, and the actor can say, oh yeah, well, I really was in this character, I really am that character. But we look at it and we say, it's the same as the last movie, or it's the same as the last play. It's good. It's very good. You know, you seem very real and honest there, and feeling the things you're supposed to feel, and et cetera, et cetera. But it is you. I'm sorry, it really isn't this character, which can happen from the moving towards the character with the compassion, and transformation can happen. So that's what I think. That's why I think it should be. I mean, it's preferred to work in this way, or to teach in this way, because there's so many characters that need to be realized even now. You know, Hamlet and Romeo, and they're, you know, ancient, hundreds of years old, but they need to be. You know, the plays are so good, the characters are so interesting, that they need to be played, and not, you know, this is Leonard as Hamlet, this is Leonard as Romeo, this is Leonard as King Lear. No, this is King Lear. This is King Lear. This is my interpretation of King Lear, certainly, but it's not Leonard. There's something of Leonard in there, but it's not. Yeah, you understand? You understand?
Yeah, of course. And why does an actor need a technique in the first place?
Because, you know, I mean, for a couple of reasons. One reason is that it's a business, and time and money and all of that is involved in the business, and rehearsing and becoming. And if we don't have a technique, then we just kind of flounder around, you know. Oh, I could do this. Oh, I could do that. Oh, I could do it this way, you know. I mean, you could work that way, but it takes a lot of time to get anywhere. And Chekhov talks about this in his book, also written by Deirdre Dupre, Lessons for the Professional Actor. And he said, you know, people ask me all the time about this method, and how much time it takes to do it, because time is an issue for all of us. You know, I want to be an actor now. He said, you know, it probably takes 2 years or so to learn this method. But after you learn the method, then you can rehearse the play, the level of a Broadway play, for example, in 2 weeks. If without the method, you can't do that. And it's been proven to me a number of times. I've directed a play, or I'm sorry, my wife directed the play. I acted in the play, and we brought it to China, and we rehearsed it in 2 weeks. And brought it there, and we could not have done it without the technique, because we talked all around the technique. We even had a rehearsal one day that was purely, we had put the play down for, we rehearsed it for 2 weeks, performed it, and then put it down for a month. And then we were going to go to China. And so the rehearsal that we had when we came back to it was purely an imaginative one. And so that we got together and we spoke. Oh, I'll enter and I will be doing this. This is what's going on. And we talked only technical talk, Chekhov technique talk. I'll come in here and I will be, flowing or flying or something like this. And I have the psychological gesture that's going to be here, and this is going to be that, and I'm going to. It was a really interesting, fascinating rehearsal, and the play came back in our imaginations through the fact that we had a technique that we could use. Also, I directed a play, and we rehearsed it with a lot of psychological gesture, and we put it down and it was wonderful, the performance, and we put it down for some months, and then came back to do another performance months later, and we started working only with the gestures. Remember the gestures you made. Let's make those gestures, and they had to do with relationships, and they had to do with objectives. They had to do with character. They had to do with a lot of application for the psychological gesture, and we just started recalling those things, and people were making these kind of interesting dances with relationships and gestures, and the whole play came back in a day. The whole play was back in a day because we had these gestures that were still in the body. They were. It's really difficult to forget a psychological gesture, and because how it's affected you, what it's done to you, what it took to make it, what it is, and it's with the body, so it's a real physical, real thing. And anyway, I was really impressed with that, to watch these actors come back to this play in a day. And it was like, wow, we're already in a decent shape here. I mean, we had a few more days to, rehearse, whatever, but to recall it came with a gesture. So I think that the technique is a necessary thing. An actor's technique is necessary for that alone.
And what was the name? Do you remember the names of the plays that you talked about right now?
The play that we took to China was Cyrano. I played Cyrano de Bergerac. And the play that I did with these, they were students of mine, and I had done this play at college with them. I was the professor there, and we had made this play, and then we put it down, and then we performed it some months later in the summertime at a conference, at Michael Chekhov conference, and with this organization MICHA, and that was part of the week-long event. And it was called The Ruffian on the Stair by Joe Orton. It was just a one-act, 3-character play. Great play, wonderful, very strange. Joe Orton is such a peculiar playwright.
Okay, next question. What are your favorite tools on the technique, and why?
Well, of course, everybody knows about the psychological gesture, and I like that psychological gesture because it is, as Chekhov says, he's talking about it in one of these books, this Lessons for the Professional Actor. He's talking about the psychological gesture as a crystallization of the will force of character. And that's a mouthful. That's maybe some people say, well, that's, that needs unpacking or something like that. But it's also connected with the archetype of the character, and archetypes figure big in Chekhov. So this is also another tool or another look or aspect of the work that's really compelling for me. And they're together, these things. I mean, later on in the book, he says the gesture and the archetype are one and the same, right? So, but this is a particular use of the psychological gesture for that. And the very idea that it is or could be a crystallization of something, then that gives it a solid form that you can return to again and again. And every time you do it, something happens. Something happens inside you just by making this gesture and its connection to the archetype, and that comes alive in you, and you understand the will force of the archetype. That's what, we use that idea of the archetype for character. We do it in place of the biography that Stanislavski asked us to make. And a lot of people are really dedicated to that work of finding the biography and writing it out on paper, and it has to be a certain length, and sharing it with your fellow actors and all this kind of thing. This is an approach that's, you know, very common and used quite a lot. Very often, students of mine who are out acting, they get in touch with me and they say, oh, you know, I'm involved in this production and the director's asking me to do this thing, to write this whole biography of the character and then share it. And it has to be like 3-4 pages long, and then share it with everybody, and I have to write it. Already some people have presented it, and I don't know how to do it, and I don't want to do it. And what am I supposed to do? What can I say to this director? You know, it's telling me that's not what you do, and see if you can get out of it. I don't know, but anyway, this really locks in some way. Lock's not a good word. What we need appears within us when we make the gesture. What we need appears within us, and we'll always do it. Always do it. And we're very free in these psychological gestures. You know, there was, we talked about Meyerhold a little while ago, and he had a lot of work with gestures, but they were all prescribed gestures. They were like with etudes and stuff. And so, no, this is how it's done. The hand is here by the knee. The other hand is up here, it's pointing, you know, the head is turned or down. And the same with Decru, everything was all externally formed, which is good training because it allows you to use your body in any kind of way. But when you come to Chekhov, it's free. You're free in this ability to make the gesture. It doesn't have to have this look. The head doesn't have to be tilted this way, you know. And then when we make examinations of things, we find that maybe the head does have to be tilted this way, but it's not a specific, you know, no, it's not enough tilted or whatever. It's just like we understand how to use space. Or how space has an impact on us, and this is what's exciting to me. I also love the imaginary body. It's another technique, and the imaginary center, and those are the main things I think that I like to teach and work with, and also the direction of the movement, the direction that movement takes. This is critical for me, and I think that. I took this idea, it comes from an exercise that was taught by Blair Cutting to me called staccato legato, which I'm sure you know. And this exercise addresses these 6 directions of movement. And so I thought, you know, I was taught this exercise and told, you shouldn't go on a stage without doing this. This should be part of your preparation to go on the stage. This should be part of your preparation before rehearsal. This should be part of your preparation before you begin the class. And it was like, okay, and we did it every day, you know, and he didn't say much more about it. This should be part of your preparation. And this is what it is. These gestures, it's really just one gesture, but this gesture is quite prescribed. But it's an addressing of the 6 directions of movement, which is forward and backward, up and down, and to the right and to the left. So I just did it. And this is like almost 40 years ago, I cannot go on the stage without doing that exercise first. I go onto the stage before the house is open. They said, we're going to open the house in 5 minutes. I'm down on the stage doing this exercise. And the beauty of it is that, you know, you fill the auditorium, you fill the space, the stage with your radiant self. You're putting yourself out there so that when you come out there, you're already out there. The audience is already expecting you to be there. They feel something that because of it. It's very energizing kind of thing, but it does deal with these 6 directions. And then I started to examine these 6 directions in terms of other things and found out that the number 6 is really interesting in this technique, and that these 6 directions keep showing up in terms of working on atmosphere, working on feelings or emotions, and working on gestures of action. It all has to do with this. It all has to do with this and our relationship to each other spatially. So it's very interesting these days that we're working with this spatial or social distancing. It's really putting the civilians, it's really putting the civilians having some awareness of space and how they move in space, because mostly we don't consciously. I mean, we're becoming conscious of it. Unconsciously, it has a big impact on us, but consciously, we don't know about it unless we really look into it. So that's the stuff that really interests me about this technique is these 6 directions. And I think that if I am allowed any contributions to this technique or the development of this technique, it will be around these 6 directions. I talk about it in a book, my book that I wrote on the technique.
So first of all, this is amazing because I also do this exercise every time before I'm going onto the stage. Before
did your teacher ask you to do that, or did you come to that yourself?
No. That's what I just when I learned it years ago, I just did it. Started doing it. Yeah, it's, I don't know, because it really opens everything, and it also gives, if I'm down before a show, if I'm coming in a very bad mood, or I don't know, when I'm doing it, I really understand how much can I give, even if I'm doing, and it energizes me. This is
I was doing it, and at one point I was in a play that was a puppet play, and I had this very it was called Juan Darien, Julie Taymor. It was fantastic piece. The music was in the form of a Catholic mass, and it was an interesting story about a boy that was written from Uruguay, Horacio Quiroga, I think his name was. And anyway, the puppet that I was operating was a skeleton, a human skeleton, and I wore it on a harness attached to my chest, so it was the same size as me. And his head was attached to strings. I was wearing a hat that were attached to his head, so if I moved my head, his head would move, and I could move his fingers, and I could move his arms, and his legs, his feet were attached to my shoes. So when I walked, he walked. It was a lovely construction of a puppet. And I started, when we started the performance, I did my usual ritual of going out into staccato legato, but I found that it was really the wrong thing, because the energy had to be in the puppet. The energy had to be coming out of the puppet, not out of me. In a way, I had to direct my stuff not out to the public, but to the puppet, so the puppet could be read. And so I had to find a whole new way to prepare to do that performance. That was a really interesting time for me. I struggled because I loved the staccato legato so much before performance, but it wasn't working. It was doing the wrong thing. It was putting too much attention on the puppeteer. I was dressed all in black, and the black thing in front of my face, so I'm not important. But there was way too much energy coming off of me and not through the puppet. So it was an interesting kind of discovery of another way to prepare.
This is so interesting. And you talked about before. You talked about your book. Can you say a few words about it?
I wrote my book because Michael Chekhov's book, as inspirational as it is kind of impossible. You can't really understand fully what he's talking about. You need a teacher. And the exercises that he suggests in there are okay. I mean, they're fine exercises, of course. They're they're suggested by the master himself, but no one's going to do them. And I wanted to write a book that would be, I guess, a companion to help people understand, and it be a workbook that people could work out of. So at first, I was not interested in doing, making exercises, writing exercises in the book. And then in discussions with the publisher, they said, no, you really have to. I said, I just want to present the theory and the way in which you can work with it. And they said, no, if you want us to publish it, you have to put exercises in it, because it's going to be for a certain audience and they're going to want it. And then I said, well, in my experience as a book reader, actor, and knowing my friends as actors and other people as actors, that actors are lazy. They're not going to do these exercises on their own. I didn't do Chekhov's exercises, really. I imagined what it could be. I went off on my own kind of thing. And then when I went to study, we didn't do those exercises. We did other exercises, which I very happily did, because I was being led through them by the teacher and with a group. That's easy. But when you're by yourself, it's difficult to do these exercises. Anyway, they said you need exercises. So I put some exercises in there, some basic that I think are important exercises in terms of getting in touch with your body and getting in touch with the space and understanding the technique. And but the reason for the book was for it to be a companion piece to Chekhov's book, to the actor, and the publishers was Routledge. They said, well, we own the rights to the actor, so maybe we could package it as a deal, you know. And I said, sure, that's fine. They didn't do that. They didn't package it as a deal. There's Michael Chekhov's book, and I wanted to call the book Nothing Personal, because that's really important part of the work for me. It isn't personal; it's subjective, and it's open. And when I bring my personal life into this work, it kind of somehow diminishes. My imagination goes into the thing that is too personal, and it's not so creative at that point. But they said, no, you can't call it Nothing Personal. And I thought it was a huge inspiration. It actually led me to complete the book when I came up with the title. And I said, no, you can't call it that. We suggest something like Michael Chekhov Handbook. It's called the Michael Chekhov Handbook. And then I said, okay, how about the Michael Chekhov Handbook for the actor? Because his book was called To the Actor. And they said, that's a lovely idea. That's what we'll call it. So that's what it's called. And it's you know, people seem to like it. I get emails to the studio from people all over the world who, you know, have read the book. And yeah, I met you that way, actually. You asked me if I would be, you know, interested in you translating the book or something like that. I seem to recall it years ago. Yeah. And so anyway, the book has been, you know, a success, I guess. It's in its second edition now. So it's been revised with some more work on more words on the use of archetype and how it's used, and other kinds of work that I've been developing with the five senses: touching, smelling, hearing, tasting.
And I read it a few times. I translated it. I don't know, maybe someday it will happen. It's very hard to publish something when you don't have the money. But I can say that I worked from it, and I did exercises with my students from it. And it's a brilliant book. If you can put your hands on it, do it.
It's been translated into German and published. It's been translated into French, not yet published. It's been translated into Turkish. It's been translated into Mandarin. And I guess it will be translated into Hebrew.
Yep. I will. Did I send you the transcript? The text in Hebrew, so you will see. Okay, I will. And my next question is, what is your dream regarding to the technique and its future, if you have one?
There are pieces of this technique that are quite fundamental to living a good life. And so the future of the technique is that, I mean, and there's a lot of people that I've met over the years who are working with this technique on a social level, and not so much of a theater. You know, I came to the theater. I'm a theater person. I'm going to stay working in the theater with it. But these social aspects are interesting, and because of this connection, this human connection. And I think that you know, my dream would be that everybody hears about it. Everybody knows about it. Not that everybody should be an actor, but everybody can benefit from the basic understanding of what it is to be a human being, what it is to be a creative human being. You know, we don't have to be actors to be creative. We can be creative and be, you know, insurance salesmen. So I think it fosters that sensibility, that human sensibility of the joy of being a creative person. So I think that everybody should hear about it. Everybody should know about it. Everybody should practice some of these things. Whether you become an actor or not is not even relevant.
I had a very interesting talk with a student of mine. He's a professional actor, and he said it to me last night, not last night, 2 days ago. He said, everybody should know this. This is exactly what you're saying. Everybody, you don't have to be an actor. There are so many elements there for your, human health, or I don't know how to call it. It's for your balancing, for your, this is, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
I mean, one of the most important things that another very influential teacher who I didn't mention had been a student of Michael Chekhov's as well. His name is Joanna Merlin. She was my teacher for a long time, and now she's a colleague and a friend. And she said that when Chekhov was teaching, because she was working with him when he was in Hollywood, she was young, like maybe 18 or 16 or something like this, and somehow she got connected with him. She said he did the very interesting thing where he never used the word no. So when in his teaching, he could say something like, people would do something or whatever, and he'd say, yes, of course, that's good. You could do that way. But maybe if you looked at it this way, something else could happen, or you would have a different kind of understanding of that. And I said, oh, that's so beautiful. That's so wonderful. And what it comes up with essentially is that everything is positive. And so that's really fantastic idea. And I was working out something about these gestures of action, and I found this one gesture, and its opposite would come in. So it's like to give, and that's a very fundamental gesture that would happen in any situation, any play, any scene. Somebody's giving something to somebody, right? And then, well, what would follow is taking. That's the opposite of it. And so I found these 6 gestures. It was I want, and or I give, I take, I want, and then I was talking to her about it, and I said, and I want, and I don't want. She said, you have to fix that. This sounds very interesting, but please try to fix that and take the negativity or the negative element of that gesture away from it. And so it got changed to reject, as opposed to I don't want. And that is a positive thing. To reject something is a positive action. And it's not, and it doesn't contain the word no in it. So all I'm really getting at is that it's fundamentally positive. Yes, it's at the bottom of everything in this technique. And that's another reason why people should learn it. Everybody should know it, that it's yes first, and then you can have all these in these improvisational rules, it's yes, always yes, right? Rules of improvisation. Yes, there's a conditional yes, like yes, okay, but there's a kind of no in that, but it's still yes. Yes, all right, I'm going to consider that and see where it'll go from there. So I think that's at the bottom of this work, is really this fundamental positivity, and that's very refreshing and sustaining for me.
And let's see, are you on for a pitch? If I'll ask you, you have 1 minute to convince someone that completed drama school to start learning the Chekhov technique, what will you say?
I'd say that are you completely satisfied with your ability to transform? Because transformation is required of you, the actor. And with all the things that are you confident that you really can transform? And if there's any doubts there, then you have to come and study with me. You have to come and study with somebody who knows this technique, because that is really at the bottom of it all. There are these lectures that have been recorded by Michael Chekhov, and in them he says this is the conscious and even unconscious wish of every artist, is to transform. and transform something, transform the material and the matter into something, some other thing, transform this series of notes into music, transform yourself into the character, transform your everyday situation into this dramatic situation or whatever. So transformation is necessary, and not so much of a adherence to you. And also the creative individuality is celebrated here, and not. So that's a really big I am. That's a huge I am, this creative individuality. And I think that, you know, I said it before, in a lot of that other kind of negative teaching, the I is knock down, knock down, knock down, knock down. So we have to build up the I am.
And my next question is, what beauty do you see in being a teacher?
Well, there's always I'm still in contact with most of my students. You know, I've been teaching for 30 years, and I know all of my students. You know, just 30 years later, I look at them and I know them, and so I can remember seeing in them understanding, reaching out to something and then grasping it and being able to make something out of it, and to celebrate themselves. So you know, to be responsible and capable of moving something in somebody in a positive, creative direction, this has been the most satisfying thing, you know. And I teach clown, you know, as part of the work, and for the most part, I remember people's clowns. And I remember their clown names. Some of them don't even remember their clown names, but that's who, you know, when I see the person say, "Oh, Bob," or whatever, you know, this was his clown's name. And that work is coming out of the Chekhov technique for me. And that work is hugely expansive and connective. And so I have to do that to teach it. I have to really expand within myself and make a connection from my heart to the heart of other people, because that's what's really at the bottom of the clown work, is an open heart. And it's at the bottom of the Chekhov work, an open heart. And so I feel that I have that to offer the world, you know, a way in which you can, and it's actually a physical occurring thing, open your heart, and something happens then. And then when you see that, it's so rewarding, so fulfilling.
I think one of the first revelation of Chekhov with the divided consciousness was in the part of a clown, right? In Germany, I think.
Yeah, he had that experience where you're playing a clown, and he was able to foresee and also witness at the same time the performance. He was guiding it from another level, and seeing it before it happened and seeing it as it was happening. And he said it was an incredible state to be in. And he said it must really have been an inspired state. It's not always the way.
Yeah.
You know, we aren't always in that place. Yeah. It's nice, I guess, you know. Yeah. But we have this idea that, which separates us a little bit from other techniques, is that, you know, Chekhov says that there are three entities that walk onto the stage. It's not just the character. And so for a lot of acting techniques, the character has to be there, and the character comes onto the stage, and the character goes through the play or through the film or whatever, right, as the character. And that's all very good, you know. But in fact, maybe it's different for the stage, but not really. The three entities that come onto the stage are the character, the actor, and the actor's higher I. And this is, you know, something very, I don't know, philosophical, mystical, strange, not down to earth, not so down to earth. And so a lot of people, excuse me, have trouble with that idea. You know, they can relate to the idea that yes, I am the character, and that's what I'm going to bring out there. And but it's never really true. It's never really true, because they have, you know, blocking, and they have things that they have to accomplish, that the actor has to accomplish in order for the story to be told. So they have to be aware that really the actor, at least the actor and the character, are out on the stage in the same body. This idea of the higher I, this is a, you know, sort of spiritual big picture of the creative human being, and that Chekhov is very much behind that, but a lot of people aren't, and they don't know how to talk about it, and they don't know how to teach it, and they don't know how to they don't even want to consider it. You know, they think it's like added stuff that's going to take away from what they're doing. I mean, I've worked with lots of directors, you know, coaching the actors, and helping with maybe blocking, choreographing some scenes and stuff, and, you know, asking actors to do certain things in the course of their performance to help the performance, to help all the other performers in the thing. And the director was, no, don't do that. That's just going to be a distraction for them. It's going to take away from what we're trying to do here. You know, it's the characters that have to be interacting with each other, not the actors. I said, okay, whatever you want. I'm working for you.
Yep. Did you had a bad experience as a Chekhov teacher, and what did you do to improve your situation?
I think the only bad experience that I had was people not really getting the positive elements of what we were trying to do, and I couldn't take them away from their personality, and so there was a conflict that happened, and then there's you know, this people who, I mean, you know, my teaching, I think, is always the same on a certain level. I mean, I am going off of what's happening, but, you know, it's so much easier to teach when people are there to listen to what you have to say. They've come to talk to you, and I mean, to listen to you. And, but then there are people come in and say, well, you know, this is not what I know about acting. This is not what I learned about acting, you know? And so you have to sort of defend what you're doing. And these people are getting all this attention, you know, in their questions, and in their, their confrontation, or their disagreement, or their inability to come to understand what you're talking about. This makes teaching difficult. You know, ideally everybody's there and they want this, they're there because they want this, you know. To teach at a studio, well, people have come to the studio for it, you know. To teach in a like university theater department setting, they haven't come for me. They've come for a program. They've come for a piece of paper to say that they're actors, you know, and they come with what they know, what they think it's all about. And so to be, you know, I used to say, I used to teach at Rutgers University. They have a very fine program there. And I taught master's students, and I taught bachelor students. And I said, I really preferred to teach the bachelor students, because they were like wet sponges when they came to me, and they just would absorb all of this business and make their own kind of sense of it. But a lot of times when the graduate students came, they had already graduated from some program in acting or whatever. They had all these ideas, and then the work became for me to moisten the sponge. They came as dry sponges. So I had to moisten the sponge somehow, and it would take some time, but eventually they would come around, you know, but that is difficult. When I feel like I have to moisten the sponge, or when I have to feel like I taught in China, for example, and they were the director of the school there said, oh, we're very, very happy you've come, because you know, we're stuck in the 1950s in this kind of old Stanislavski way of acting. I mean, we have, you know, the Peking opera and that kind of thing, those traditions, but for the modern, working for the cinema, working on stage in the modern world, you know, this is what we have. And so it was like, so we were really happy you've come. And so we started working, and I felt like for the first 3 days that I was, you know, that I was standing on a mountaintop, which I always feel like I'm standing on top of a mountain. But I had to haul this whole couple of classes up the mountain, you know, with every word I said. I was like dragging them up this mountain so that they could get a view of what we were doing. And then one day they got the view. 3 days into it, they got the view, and it was like, wow, the whole thing just exploded and became a whole other kind of experience there for everybody. That was difficult teaching. Hauling people up a mountain is difficult.
I know what you mean. I had a similar experience the other day. I did 3 days workshop to professional actors in the most, it's the biggest theater in Israel. Really, he's producing so many shows a year, and they are wonderful actors. But when I did the first day was very tough because I don't know if they didn't know what to expect, or when I asked to spy back after the exercises, they went silence. I mean, that was, and afterwards they told me we were fighting against ourselves because we didn't know. I mean, are we going with you? Are we? And we said yes. And the third day was a very good day. I think it takes time. Even to professional actors, because they come with this, knowledge and their own techniques. This is very interesting.
But they can't. Those are the people who can't answer that question that I had proposed earlier in this interview. Was how do you know when you're sad? How do you know when you're happy? How do you know when you're jealous? What's going on for you? How do you know that, right? And they don't know. They just know that they got to do it, or they're feeling it, but they don't know what it is. As soon as they recognize what it is, then they're with you.
Yeah.
It's something, and it's something, and that's what the value of that spy back is. This is what this is. Do it again. See if you get the same thing. Oh, look, it's there. It's the same. Do it again. Right. And then spy back becomes a great tool, but it takes time for people to understand what you're trying to do. Because everything comes so intellectual to us. Everything, everything has to be passed by the intellect. And actually, Chekhov is asking us to bypass the intellect for a time. Spy back is the intellect.
Yeah.
And so we have to have the experience of the exercise or the work without the intellect, and then bring the intellect to it. And that's really part of being a human being as well. And that's working on the whole human being. But here we just separate. This is the intellect's out here. The imagination is in, the sensation is in, the body's in, the energy is in, everything is in, and what's happening. Oh, this is happening. Okay, let's talk about it. Now it's the intellect, right? And and he separates the intellect into two parts, the little intellect and the higher intellect. And he wants us to engage the higher intellect, but the spy back is an engagement of the little intellect. And if it's not engaged, it's going to fight with you. And that's what the silence is. They don't know how to engage the little intellect consciously. The little intellect is always there. As Chekhov says in those speeches, in those lectures, those recorded things, that it's always sniffing around, looking for problems. It's that judging kind of mind it's a useful thing in the day-to-day life, but it doesn't really help us as artists. It is an interference. But until we can reconcile with it somehow and say, oh, you can join us in the spy back, you can join me in the spy back, and then you're with me, you're working with me. Until that happens, that's just going to fight with you. I mean, I talk to doing work or whatever, and people were struggling with some stuff. It's like, well, what's going on? We were working with character and imagination, and I asked the actors to imagine the character, and this guy said, well, all I see is a black and white picture of his back. He's got his back to me, and I said, but you can control that. You can, or at least you can ask the image to turn around and present itself. And so he did that, and this incredible thing came over this actor. It was just amazing. And he said, it turned around. It was in full color, in full view. I saw him, and he wasn't fighting. He was giving me everything that I was hoping he would give me from the exercise. But you have to take that step. You know, that's a little intellect fighting with you, giving you black and white pictures, just profiles. Or I've had it many times where, you know, I'm trying to imagine the character, and I see the shape of the character, but not the face, for example. You know, it takes a couple of days of working. But I believe that's the little intellect is saying, that's not worth it. What are you going to get out of that?
And use 1, 2, or 3 words. Acting is
being before other people, presenting a creation of something that's truthful.
Well, that wasn't 3 words, Leonard.
Acting is transforming into the other. Acting is transforming into the, that's 4 words, into another.
No, 4 is good. 4 is good. Lisa did 4, it's good. I think David got us with 3. I can't remember.
What did David say? What did David say? Acting is what?
I need to check it out. Yeah. Tell me about your program of teaching. What's the platform, options in the studio?
Well, it's all up in the air at the moment because we can't meet in the studio, right? So the thing has just been completely interrupted. But what was I had a program called Art of the Actor, and it was 22 weeks. And it was the first 11 weeks are separated into 3, and the second 11 weeks are separated into the same 3 categories. And the categories are I, that's me, right? This is me, this is my body, this is what my body can do for me, this is what I can do with my body. That's the first part. Second part is called we. And with this body, with all of this knowledge, I now come into relationship with another actor. I come into relationship with the space. I come into relationship with the text. And the next section is they, and I take this, what is I and what is we, and I present it in front of they. And then we have a break, and we come back, and we work in they, and then we go to we, and then we go back to I. It's kind of nice, kind of poetic.
Yeah. and what you have, I mean, it's not the only program you have, right? This is your main, like the main
Yeah.
What else?
Yeah, I mean, I offer, we offer workshops. We have, like I said, we have a summer retreat where we worked last year. Last summer, we worked on archetypes and masks and psychological gesture. And the year before that one, we worked on clown and acting, and we took out the sections from A Midsummer Night's Dream, the mechanicals, the clowns. We took those out of the play, and we worked on that stuff, and we performed that stuff. After 4 days of work, we gathered an audience and presented what we did with these characters, with these clowns, with this material. And it was really fantastic. I mean, people had books in their hands. They still had to read some of the text because 4 days is,
Yeah.
we didn't know what we were doing, really. We were just examining stuff, and what we presented was what we had. And so it was interesting because I'm sure the audience didn't know the play. They probably knew of it. They didn't know it. And see these actors reading. And at the same time, they were ad-libbing. So they were also making up text while they were looking at the text in their hands. So I think the audience must have thought that, well, that must be what the text is because they're reading it. But everybody was quite impressed. The year before, we worked on a text from Eugene O'Neill. And so that was a character development class, retreat. And I teach clown, and I also teach a workshop called Acting the Song, which is for musical theater people or opera singers, and to be able to act the story of the song. The emotional narrative content of the song is expressed through the singing. I don't teach singing or voice, because that's not what I do. I teach the acting part of it, and we work with gestures and sensations and atmosphere and things like that, those pieces of technique. And I do scene study classes, which we call the dramatic imagination. And that's done a little bit differently than most scene study classes, in that it's a group of maybe 12 people. And we work on 1 or 2 scenes. Everybody works on the same material, so that you keep seeing the same scene over and over and over again. You hear the words over and over and over again, so you learn them very quickly. And we get to work on it in the class. Come up with ideas about this or that, or what needs to happen here. And so we can get up on our feet and start doing exercises around the scene, as opposed to most scene study classes are you and me, we decide we're going to work on a scene and we bring it into our teacher. We rehearse, we bring it into our teacher, and our teacher says, yes, that looks very good, but you don't have this and you don't have that, and you need to look at this and you need to look at that. So do that and bring it back next week or whatever, right? And then another group goes up and they do their scene, and the same thing happens. And then we go back and rehearse at home, and then we show what we've done. But in this, everybody's working on the same thing. So we usually do these, what I find to be interesting scenes. So I choose the material, and there's scenes generally between a man and a woman. So that if, for example, you and me, or we'll say that it doesn't matter. If I don't show up at class, my partner still can work with somebody else, because it's the same material, and we can develop it. So we do that. And clown, I already said that. Yeah, I guess I did that. So, but I'm interested. I think I'm going to be more interested in acting for the camera. I mean, I'm interested in that, but I don't really offer any workshops or anything like that around that. But I may, now that this is happening, this camera, whatever, how do we deal with that? And I mean, acting for Zoom, I mean, we made a performance. It's not the same as acting for television or for the cinema, just got this thing to deal with here. And you got to make the most of that, and however you do it. So I don't know. I don't know how anything is going to be. It's all going to be like this, probably for a while, teaching on Zoom. I mean, you said that you're opening, you're teaching again. So you're meeting with people now?
Yeah.
In a room.
Yeah, in a room, but let's hope they won't stop this again. I don't know. I really hope so. But I really think that they won't go back. I don't know. That's
They won't go. What do you mean they won't go back?
They won't go back to full quarantine. I don't think so. And if so only to maybe older people, or people that have background diseases, or I don't know. I don't think that they will do it again, but let's hope.
Yeah, I mean, there's all this protesting and demonstrations going on in this country now, and people have really been close together, where they've been asked to be socially distant. Mm-hmm. And they're expecting a spike in, which obviously is a necessary thing. Something had to be said, and something has to be done, and people have to make their voices known, or their desires known. Yeah. To the powers. And I guess that's the only way we have to do it, is to gather in mass and say that we want to change.
Yeah, there were a lot of demonstrations here too, also. Yeah, but
for the same thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
And not only a lot of, but here the government didn't offer the help that the people think that they should.
No, they never do, right?
No, and that was what the demonstration are all about.
Yeah, and you have this other very particular problem there with the Palestinian or Arab-Israeli situation.
Yeah, but that's another. Yeah, that's not.
But it's still the same kind of like the issue is, you know, one people are treated quite differently than another people because of what? Because of some sort of racial thing, some sort of thing like that, right?
That's so
religious thing. I don't know.
Yeah, that's so complicated. And also inside Israel, you have a lot of, you know, how they treat people from the gay community, how they treat people. I mean, they can't get married, they can't because of religious. You know, in Israel, the Judaism and state are, you know, one.
Yeah.
So it raises a lot of issues. Yeah, we are living in a complicated world. But moving on. We have two more questions.
All right.
And I also wanted to say that now, especially in the last few years, you're traveling like crazy with classes.
No, I've been traveling like crazy for a long time.
Oh yeah. Oh really?
A long time. Yeah. I mean, at least 20 years I've been traveling quite regularly around the world. I was at one time, I believed myself to be the ambassador for Michael Chekhov, but my position has been usurped by another, and he's been traveling a whole lot more. Uli is now truly the ambassador for Michael Chekhov.
I always tell him and other people that I'm talking, you know, so Uli needs to stand in the place, and people need to, you know, spin the globe beneath his feet, and then do stop, and he will teach.
Yeah, that's exactly how it seems to be. So exactly, but he's doing a great job. You know, he's really creating a real international community of people who want to work this way, and pursuing it all the time. I was supposed to be there in May this year with him.
Hamburg?
In Hamburg, yeah, with him and Olivia. And then I was going to go from there to Ireland, and then from Ireland to Rome, but it all got canceled. So you know, eating is a different thing now. How you eat has become a different thing.
What do you mean?
Well, I was going to get paid for all that stuff.
Oh yeah. No, but it will come back. It will come back.
I don't know. Just I mean, I'm not. Somehow I don't see myself traveling as much as I did, for sure. It just doesn't seem like it's going to happen.
Okay. Tell me about a student of yours that you remember very well that touched you for some reason. Somebody that you was teaching the Chekhov technique to, and he did something remarkable, or you connected in some way through the work, something that you can't forget and it really lives in you.
I used to do, and when I remember it, I still do it, but I forget it a lot, an exercise where I asked the students to go out into the world and find some horrifying or ugly thing that they see, and they should not turn away from it. They should look at it and come back and describe it to us and make us feel how they felt when they saw it, how horrified or, you know, repulsed or whatever they were by it. And they would do that, and that would be a very interesting thing to watch them describe this sight that they saw. Everybody had very interesting things to talk about, and what happened to them, what was going on in their bodies as this was part of the exercise. It's part of the observing of the exercise, what was going on in the body while the person was describing this, and then after they were done. So you finished, and yes, can you still see it? Yes, I can still see it. Can you now tell us something that's really beautiful about this? And that was like, the body would, before they even started talking, their body would change. It was just an incredible thing to watch, because they were talking and they were trying to make us feel how they felt, and it was all very, it was contraction happening. And then it's like, now tell me something beautiful. And before they even said anything, this incredible expansion would happen over their whole body. And then they would say, you know, they were maybe talking about some, I don't know, mold or something, and then it all of a sudden looked like, you know, velvet jacket. I don't know. So, but there was one man, and he actually became a friend of mine after, when the teaching was over. This was at university. I said, well, you're not my student anymore. We can be friends now. You know, yeah, let's be friends. So we're still friends. And he was talking about a man who was, as I can remember, coughing really terribly and coughing up stuff. And it was just awful, awful thing. And then when he sat down, he was standing up telling us this. And then when he sat down, he just, you know, began to open up, and then he just started weeping, and all of this beauty that was in this thing that he was talking about, you know. And what he was talking about, the man was actually coughing up his lungs, and it was, you know, it was so intense to listen to it. I was so moved, and I looked around at everybody. Everybody was just stunned. And the fact is, he was visiting the class. He wasn't even his class. He had already done this exercise before. And then he said, "Oh, I have something. Can I do it?" And it was like, whoa. Anyway, it was so moving, and he was so there in it, and so full of this expansion. And I don't remember exactly what he said. I can't recall what he said, but I can recall how I was moved like I had never been moved before by anybody performing anything, and because it was so full of himself, his humanity, his truth, that yeah, I don't know. Does that answer your question?
Sure. And extra. So we are in our last question, and the last question is the technique helping you in your everyday life? And if so, can
Yes.
you give some examples?
Well, there's an example right there. You know, I mean, it's very easy to look at the world and say, "Ugh, that's awful," especially living in a place like New York City, or, you know, or Tel Aviv, or whatever. You know, it's just like there's so much ugliness around us, and so many ways that people respond to each other. And I remember my teacher talking about that, you know, and he told us a story about something, and I was young and kind of stupid, I guess, I don't know. And he told us a story about this man that he saw, and the way he described it was funny to me, and so I started to laugh. And he looked at me and just very, oh, this is, you know, this is a man's life. This is what happens. This is you're not moved in another way. This is not funny. And it was just like, you know, and it changed me quite a lot. And then I started to look at life through the guise of this, what's ugly is also beautiful, this idea of polarities, this idea of love, you know, and connection with the human being and the human spirit. This is a day-to-day kind of thing, and this came out of this technique for me. You know, I was just a kind of, you know, person who went to school and tried to be a good actor, but now I'm working at being a human being all the time.
Well, Leonard, this is the end.
Ooh. There's something beautiful in that, right?
What?
There's something beautiful in that.
Yeah. Well, I really want to thank you for your time, really, and your generosity.
It's my pleasure, Ofir. My pleasure.
It was so interesting, And I really hope that we will meet again and not in Zoom. And actually, I'm sure we will.
Well, we're operating in the same network.
Yeah. So
it was a pleasure to work with you last summer. In Tel Aviv. It was great to see how enthusiastic and accomplished you are, or you were, but you are. You're probably even better now. I could see how you were really appreciating what was happening there in a larger sense than just, I'm learning some exercises. You know, I'm in this, and this is the work, and this is the world.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you, and until next time.
Until next time.